My name is Jenna Callahan. The night my brother got married, my father lifted his champagne glass, looked straight at me and said, "Caleb's our golden boy," while Jenna here's still figuring out what to do with herself. The guests laughed. But they weren't laughing when the screen behind him lit up with footage of me, dragging a stranger from a burning building, my uniform scorched, my face bleeding, refusing to quit until she was safe. My father dropped his glass. I didn't say a word. Just turned to the crowd and let the truth speak for itself. Tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. It happened in the kitchen, always the kitchen in our house. The orange light from the overhead lamp cast long shadows over the laminate counters and the bowl of half-peeled potatoes. I was still in my school uniform, the edges of my jacket damp from the snow outside. And my father, Rick Callahan, sat at the table in his usual flannel shirt, his calloused hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug like he was the judge of all things sacred and serious. "I'm applying to Millstone Military Academy," I said, sliding the glossy brochure across the table like a peace offering. "Early admission." His lips curled before he even looked at it. "Military school, for what, Jenna?" He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "That's no place for a girl, you'll just embarrass yourself." There it was, the line, the slap-in-the-face smirk that always came when I tried to want more than what he thought I should have. "Excuse me." My heart thumped so loudly I could feel it in my teeth. "Embarrass myself." He didn't flinch. "It's not a game. You think they're gonna hand you a gun and let you play soldier because you read too many books about war heroes. You wouldn't last 2 weeks. Better to try and fail than rot in this kitchen folding laundry and cooking dinner for you," I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. "And I wouldn't be embarrassing myself, Dad. I'd be embarrassing you with honor." He stood up, slow, deliberate, and towering. I saw the edge of his jaw tight, the way it always did before he said something cruel. But this time he didn't have to say anything else. Because silence said everything. I looked to my mother. She stood by the stove, wooden spoon in hand, her eyes not on me, not on him, but on the bubbling pot in front of her. Like she couldn't hear us. Like if she didn't choose a side, she wouldn't be scorched by the fallout. "Nothing to say?" I asked her. "Mom," still nothing. That hurt more than anything my father could have said. I grabbed my coat and yanked open the back door, the blast of cold air stinging my face. The screen slammed behind me, but I didn't look back. Not even when I heard him mutter, "There she goes, the drama queen." Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, light but persistent, covering the ground like silence covers a truth no one wants to face. I didn't cry. Not then, because something inside me had locked into place. A decision, a need. If I couldn't get into Millstone, fine. If my father thought I wasn't good enough, fine. But I would make my own kind of uniform. One he'd never see coming. And one day, he'd choke on those words. 3.5 years later, the air smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase markers. I was tucked into the corner of my dorm room in Cincinnati, legs crossed beneath me on the squeaky mattress, wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and balancing a laptop, a journal, and 3 open textbooks across my lap and the bedspread. It wasn't a barracks, and there was no uniform, no drill instructor barking orders at dawn. But this life, it was its own kind of battlefield. "Jenna," Elise called out from our mini kitchen, the worn-down coffee maker sputtering beside her. "You want the last mug, or should I pour it into my IV bag?" "Gimme half," I murmured, not looking up. "Gotta stay conscious but not jittery." She laughed as she poured, then crossed the room to hand me a chipped mug that had a cartoon cat saying I need a nap and an alibi on it. Elise was chaos in tie-dye. Messy bun, psychology major, and emotionally allergic to structure. But somehow she'd become one of the only people who understood me. "You've been in that same spot since, what, sunrise?" she asked, nodding at the open anatomy textbook under my elbow. "You realize there's a thing called rest, right?" I shrugged, flipping a page in my journal. "This is rest. Compared to growing up in Rick Callahan's house, this is practically a spa." That earned me a low whistle. "Damn, that bad, huh?" I hesitated. "It's not just him, it's how I felt there. Like no matter what I wanted, it was always wrong. Military school, too ambitious, medicine, a waste of time, every goal I had somehow offended him." Elise sat on her bed across from me, tucking her feet beneath her. "But you still chose this path," I nodded. "Because I realized it wasn't about proving him wrong anymore, it's about proving myself right. This," I tapped the journal, "this is mine. Every late night, every lecture, every quiz I bombed and bounced back from. No one can say I didn't earn it. She raised her mug in a mock toast. You're gonna make one hell of a doctor, Jenna. I smiled softly, taking a long sip. From your mouth to the admissions committee's ears. A peaceful silence settled between us, the hum of campus life muffled by our shared walls. Outside our window, the leaves were beginning to turn crimson, gold, and copper, a quiet reminder that even time itself could be brave enough to change. I glanced down at my journal again, skimming what I'd written. You chose discipline. You chose courage, just not his version of it. He thinks strength only wears a uniform. He'll never see how much strength it takes to build a life without approval. That's okay, he doesn't have to see it, you do. There were days, plenty of them, where I questioned myself. When the lab reports bled into each other and the smell of cadaver lab clung to my clothes. When Elise went home for breaks and I stayed behind, working extra shifts at the library to afford books. When the idea of success felt like an empty promise I'd made to a younger, angrier version of myself. But then I'd remember what it felt like, standing in our farmhouse kitchen, cold air swirling in behind me, rage and shame knotting in my chest, and I'd pick up the pen again. The stethoscope would come later. The sacrifice was now. Elise pulled her comforter up to her chin and mumbled through a yawn, You ever think about calling him your dad? I blinked at the question, unsure how to answer. No, I said finally. Not until I've done something worth him pretending he's proud of. She didn't press. Just nodded, her eyelids fluttering shut. I stared out the window for a long while after that, watching the streetlights flicker to life, watching a kid in a ROTC jacket jog down the sidewalk, head held high. I wasn't wearing the uniform, but I was still fighting. And someday I'd win. The first thing I noticed when I stepped through the front door of the farmhouse was that nothing had changed. Not the faded wallpaper near the coat rack, not the smell of pine cleaner and frying oil, not the sound of the ancient ceiling fan ticking like a stubborn clock in the living room. Everything was exactly as it had been before I left. Except me. Jenna, my mother's voice floated in from the kitchen. That you? I set my duffel bag down gently, brushing the road dust from my sleeves. It's me, Mom. She emerged, wiping her hands on a dish towel, the same soft blue one she always seemed to have. Her hair had more silver than I remembered, her eyes more caution than joy. Still, she smiled faintly and stepped forward to hug me. You look thin, she murmured against my shoulder. I've been busy, I said, pulling back. I didn't add busy sending out 47 job applications and hearing silence from 46. Or busy wondering if all my degrees were worth anything without someone willing to hire me, or busy surviving on caffeine and rejection letters. Your room's just how you left it, she said, already turning away, voice light. You can rest before dinner. Is Dad here? She paused at the threshold of the kitchen. He's in the barn. He'll come in when he's hungry. Of course he would. I went upstairs to the room that was no longer mine but still had my old lacrosse trophy on the shelf and a yellowing poster of Amelia Earhart above the desk. I sat on the bed and stared at the cracked ceiling for a long time, waiting for my stomach to settle. By the time dinner rolled around, I was already rehearsing comebacks in my head. I knew what was coming. It was just a question of when. At the table, my father didn't look up when I sat down. Surprised to see you, he said after a moment, digging his fork into a heap of mashed potatoes. Didn't think doctors had time for family visits. I'm not a doctor yet, I said evenly. I'm still waiting on placement. He chewed, swallowed. Guess all those books didn't teach you how to get hired. I felt the words hit just below my ribs, sharp and familiar, like the flick of a switchblade you never see coming, even though you should. My mother passed me the basket of rolls without meeting my eyes. So what now? My father asked. You come back to roost until you figure out your next genius move. I'm not here to stay, I replied. Just a few days while I regroup. He snorted. Regroup sounds official. There was a silence then, long, heavy, stretching out across the table like another guest. I focused on my plate, pushing green beans around, breathing slow. You know, he added, dabbing his mouth with a napkin, I always said you were chasing shadows. Soldier or surgeon seems like neither worked out, huh? I looked up. His eyes were steady, cold, almost amused. I wanted to scream. To throw my water glass against the wall and ask what it would take for him to see me. What I'd have to do. How many battles I'd have to win for him to stop treating me like a failed science experiment. Instead, I said nothing. I met his stare, let it pass through me like wind through stone, and picked up my fork again. He wanted a reaction. He wanted drama. That's how he stayed the one in control. But he didn't get to define my failures anymore. I chewed, swallowed, and quietly asked my mother if she still had that old kettle I used to like, the one that whistled too loud when it boiled. She nodded, clearly grateful for the subject change, and rose to retrieve it. As she turned on the burner, my father muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "Should have gone to beauty school like your cousin Erin. At least she's got clients." I stood up. My chair scraped back slow and sharp against the tile. "I'm going for a walk," I said, keeping my tone even. "You just got here," my mother said, startled. "I won't be gone long." I stepped outside, the night air cold against my face, and walked down the gravel path toward the edge of the fields. The stars above were clear and distant, like they were watching with quiet judgment. But I didn't cry. I let the anger settle deep in my chest like coals, not burning wild, just glowing steady, controlled. There was a time I might have let his words tear me in half. But not now. Now I just added them to the list of things I would prove wrong. The room I rented in Dayton was barely big enough to turn around in. A twin mattress on the floor, one window with a broken latch, and a radiator that hissed like it was angry to be alive. But it was mine. I kept my textbooks stacked beside the bed, even though I wasn't sure if I'd ever use them again. The savings I'd built up after college were thinning fast, and every rejection email felt like a silent door slamming shut. Most mornings I volunteered at the free clinic downtown, taking vitals, organizing supplies, sometimes sitting with elderly patients who just needed a warm hand and a steady voice. It wasn't paid, but it kept my mind from slipping into the loop of what now, what now, what now. It was on one of those mornings that everything changed. I'd stopped by the public library to print off another round of applications. My resume had so many edits it looked like a quilt. I reached for the printer tray and noticed the flyer taped above it. "Now recruiting, Dayton Fire Academy. Strong enough, brave enough, we're hiring." I stared at it for a long moment, something in me stirring like a hibernating animal blinking awake. Firefighting. I remembered the morning runs I'd pushed myself through in college before sunrise, the weight training, the obstacle course practice I'd done in secret when no one believed in me. Millstone Military had said no. But the need to serve, to act, to move, I'd never really buried that. I tore off one of the little paper tabs with the phone number and tucked it into my pocket. That night I sat cross-legged on the floor beside my mattress, phone in hand, debating. What if I didn't make it? What if I washed out again? But then another voice whispered, "What if you do? What if this is it?" I dialed. The woman who answered sounded brisk but warm. "Dayton Fire Academy. You calling about the recruitment class?" I cleared my throat. "Yeah, my name's Jenna Callahan, I'm interested." The entrance process was brutal, timed runs, strength tests, simulated rescues, panel interviews that dissected every inch of your motivation like an autopsy. But something about it felt right. There was no place to hide behind academic jargon or fake credentials. You either climbed the tower in under 6 minutes or you didn't. You either hauled the weighted dummy across the concrete or you collapsed halfway and they moved on. I didn't collapse, I passed. And on a chilly Monday morning with fog clinging to the pavement like a secret, I stood at the edge of Dayton Station 14, wearing the Academy-issue sweats and waiting for orientation to begin. The air smelled like diesel and pine cleaner and something hot in the wind, and I had never felt more awake. "Hey," someone said beside me. A guy, maybe early 30s, with a lopsided grin and biceps like carved stone. "First day jitters or just lost in thought?" I smiled. "A little of both." "I'm Marcus," he said, holding out a hand. "Former Army, now just trying not to trip over my own boots and embarrass myself in front of the captain." I shook his hand. "Jenna, no military background, just stubbornness," he laughed. "Well, stubborn gets you far in this job, so does that form you had on the hose drag. I'd bet you were born for this." That one sentence, "born for this," settled over me like a balm. I wasn't used to being praised for strength, for pushing through, for anything physical that didn't come with a condescending smirk. The others were gathering inside. The captain, a tall woman with gray-streaked hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, was handing out schedules and locker assignments. Marcus nudged me. "Come on, first impressions and all that." As we stepped inside, I glanced back once at the sky. Somewhere my father still thought I was floundering, still believed I'd missed the mark. He didn't know I'd found something better than the paths he approved of. He didn't know I was building a life where strength meant more than trophies or titles. And he definitely didn't know I'd just been handed the first real chance to belong. There's a certain kind of quiet that lives inside a firehouse when the calls slow down and the day finally exhales. Not the tense silence before a dispatch crackles to life, not the roaring focus of a response, but a soft, lived-in quiet. Like the house itself is catching its breath alongside you. It was Thursday night, the station was still, and dinner was on the stove, chili thick with spice, cornbread browning in a square tin that looked older than any of us. Someone had brought sweet tea from the corner gas station, and someone else had rigged up music on an old Bluetooth speaker playing low country blues. I stirred the pot on the stovetop, then slid into the open seat across from Marcus and our engineer Troy, who was telling a story so animated he nearly knocked over his drink. And this guy's halfway through the window, screaming that his cat is still inside, Troy said, eyes wide with memory. So I'm thinking, okay, we'll go back for the cat. But then he yells, she bites. And I'm like, sir, is it a cat or a guard dog dressed in a fur coat? Everyone cracked up, including Claire, our station captain, who stood at the counter nursing a cup of coffee like it was her religion. Did you get the cat? I asked, smiling. Oh yeah, Troy grinned. Took 2 towels, a full set of arm-length gloves, and an entire can of tuna, but I still have the scar on my wrist. Wanna see? Hard pass, I said, laughing. I've seen enough human bite marks in med training, I'll take your word. Claire walked over, slow and steady, as the laughter simmered down. She leaned her hip against the counter and watched the room for a beat before speaking. You're settling in well, Callahan. It was the first time she'd addressed me directly in front of the others like that. My chest tightened, unsure whether it was pride or panic. I'm trying, I said carefully. You're more than trying. Her gaze didn't flinch. You've got the makings of a leader. The room didn't go quiet, but it shifted. Marcus looked over from his bowl of chili and gave a half nod like he already agreed. Troy raised an eyebrow, surprised but not disagreeing. Me, a leader, I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. I'm still learning. You think any of us walked in knowing how to lead? Claire asked. It starts with how you carry yourself when no one's watching, how you show up to train, how you treat the person next to you whether you've been here 10 years or 10 days. I swallowed hard. I've never heard that said to me before. Then you've been around the wrong people. She said it so matter-of-factly that it took a second to land. My mind flashed Dad's smirk, his dismissive tone, the long table back home where I was always the failed experiment. Here, across mismatched chairs and scratched tabletops, I was something else. Valued. I looked down at my bowl, scooped a bite of chili, and let the warmth spread past my throat, into my ribs, into the parts of me that used to ache for approval and learned to live without it. Thanks, Captain, I said softly. She gave a short nod and walked away, leaving me with the echo of her words and a strange sense of being full. Not from food, from belonging. Marcus leaned closer once Claire was out of earshot. That's not a small thing. Claire's got eyes like a hawk. She doesn't hand out compliments unless she means them. I noticed, I murmured. You good? He asked, watching me with quiet curiosity. I hesitated. I'm just not used to this. People believing I belong somewhere, let alone that I could lead. Well, get used to it, he said, dunking a chunk of cornbread into his bowl. Because it's true. You walk in like you're already holding the line, people notice that. For a long moment I didn't say anything. I just sat there in that overwarmed kitchen with the chilly steam rising and laughter circling the walls. There was no place I needed to be but here. No one mocking me. No one doubting me. No one waiting for me to fail just to prove their point. I wasn't a disappointment here. I was a teammate, a future leader, a firefighter. And for the first time in years, I believed I might actually deserve that title. It was supposed to be routine. An overheated stovetop in a second-floor apartment, smoke billowing through the hallways, alarms shrieking but no visible flames. We handled worse before breakfast. Claire gave the go-ahead and we moved in 3 units, full gear, search and sweep. I had my rhythm down by then. Breathe steady, sweep left, sweep right. Trust the visibility line. Check each room like the person you love most in the world might be behind the door. That's how I found her. She was curled behind a collapsed dresser in a back bedroom, young, maybe 20, her fingers still clutching a phone with a shattered screen. Her body was limp, face half covered in soot, eyes fluttering like she was caught between dreaming and dying. I radioed. Victim located. Second bedroom. She's unconscious. I'm pulling her. Claire's voice snapped through the comms. Copy. We need everyone out in 90 seconds. Structure's unstable. Grab her and go. I didn't wait for help. There wasn't time. I hooked my arms under hers and dragged her across the floor, blind through the smoke. My lungs burned. My knees screamed. The air turned to fire inside my mask. I didn't even realize the ceiling had started to groan until Claire's voice came through again, louder, panicked this time. Jenna, get out, now. The girl stirred weakly in my arms, moaning as the air around us turned gold and orange and wrong. I stumbled through the hallway, half carrying, half dragging her. Every inch felt like a war. Every second sounded like thunder. The smoke curled inside my gear, kissed my skin. I felt heat where I shouldn't have. We cleared the door just barely. As my boots hit the pavement, the second floor gave way behind us in a roar of collapsing wood and choking ash. People screamed. My knees buckled, the girl slipped from my arms, and the last thing I heard before everything went black was Claire's voice shouting my name. The hospital room was too white. Even with the blinds drawn and flowers set neatly on the windowsill, it all felt too sterile. I was bandaged from wrist to shoulder, my right side mottled red beneath the gauze, my neck wrapped tight, and my skin tight as wire. Burns, second degree. Some deep partial, they'd said. Lucky, considering how close I'd been. Lucky. I hadn't seen the girl since the night of the fire. Didn't even know her name, just that she was alive, that she'd made it. Claire came by the next afternoon, quiet as ever. She didn't bring flowers or balloons, just a mug of real coffee and a newspaper folded to the story. Firefighter pulls woman from blaze moments before collapse. She handed it to me without ceremony. I read the headline once, then set it aside. You broke protocol, Claire said. I nodded. I know. You saved her life. Another nod. She exhaled slowly, then reached out and gently placed her hand over mine. And you nearly lost yours. I couldn't leave her, I whispered, even if she was a stranger. Claire studied me for a long moment, then stood. Heal fast, we'll keep the station warm for you. When she left, I stared out the window at the pale winter sky. The job had taken something from me, skin, strength, time, but it had also given something back. A reason, a story. A moment that no one, not even my father, could take from me. The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday, tucked between an overdue electric bill and a flyer for half-off oil changes. I nearly missed it. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, Caleb and Ava. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned it over in my hands. I hadn't spoken to Caleb in nearly 5 months, not because anything was wrong, but because nothing had ever felt close enough to stay in touch. He was Dad's favorite. The golden boy with clean boots and a permanent smirk. But he'd never been cruel, just distant, too careful to intervene, too safe to stand up. Still, I opened the envelope. The wedding would be held at a garden hall in Cincinnati, close enough that I couldn't use distance as an excuse, far enough that I could stay anonymous in a crowd. And honestly, after weeks in recovery, away from the station, away from my crew, away from the adrenaline and purpose, I missed people. Even if they were the complicated kind. That night, I stared at my arm in the bathroom mirror. The skin was healing, but it would never be the same. Red patches curled over my elbow and shoulder like molten lacework, a pattern of pain I hadn't asked for but now carried like armor. I chose a long-sleeved navy dress with a high neckline and soft fabric that didn't rub. I twisted my hair into a low knot and wore simple silver earrings. No uniform, no badges. Just me, quiet, scarred, and still standing. The garden hall smelled like roses and rain. White folding chairs lined the walkway beneath twinkling lights strung between trees. The reception was already in motion when I arrived, soft jazz playing, laughter rising from clustered tables, champagne glasses catching the last golden slant of sunset. I hovered at the edge of the canopy, scanning the crowd until I saw him. Caleb. His suit fit well, dark hair neatly combed, one hand on Ava's lower back as he guided her through a sea of compliments and old family friends. When he saw me, his expression changed. Not shock, not pity, just warmth. Jenna, he said, stepping forward. Hey, I smiled. Congratulations. He hugged me, not stiff, not guarded, real. I didn't think you'd come, I shrugged. I didn't either. Ava joined us then, her eyes kind and curious. It means a lot that you're here. I brought something for you, I told Caleb, reaching into my small clutch and pulling out a small velvet box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a silver pocket watch, antique but polished, with a new engraving on the back. Time reminds us who we are. Caleb turned it over, thumb brushing the words. This was Grandpa's. Figured it belonged to someone starting something new, I said. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked up at me, not like I was the black sheep, not like I was the family embarrassment, just like I was his sister. Thank you, he said simply. I smiled, stepping back. Go, enjoy your party. He hesitated, like he wanted to say more, but Ava tugged him gently back toward the crowd. I found a quiet corner near the back, sipping water and watching the chandeliers flicker in the soft wind. I had no idea how the night would go. No idea if Dad would show. No idea if Mom would pretend nothing had ever been wrong. But for now, I'd given a gift from the heart. I had shown up on my own terms, and for the first time in years that felt like enough. The clink of glass against silverware rang out, crisp and familiar, cutting through the soft hum of celebration. Conversations hushed, laughter quieted, and all eyes turned to the long table where Rick Callahan stood, champagne in hand, confidence on display. I felt it before he even opened his mouth. That slow tightening in my chest. The way every muscle braced itself for something I hadn't prepared for, but had always known was coming. I'd like to say a few words, he began, grinning as if he owned the air around him. We've been through a lot as a family, but tonight, we celebrate Caleb, our golden boy. A soft wave of chuckles spread across the tables. Caleb looked down at his hands, embarrassed but not surprised. Ava leaned into him gently, whispering something in his ear. And look at him now, Dad continued, lifting his glass a little higher. Steady job, beautiful wife, sharp dresser, hell, even showed up to dinner on time. Another ripple of laughter. I kept my smile neutral, polite, controlled. He's made us proud since the day he was born, Rick added, swaying just slightly, the edge of alcohol beginning to show in his loosened posture. Always knew what he wanted, went for it, no nonsense. He paused too long. That pit in my stomach opened wider. And then there's Jenna, he said, tilting his glass toward me. Still figuring out what to do with herself. Laughter. Real laughter this time. Light, social, unaware laughter. My mother chuckled softly beside him, giving a little shake of her head as if to say he's just teasing. But she didn't stop him. She never did. I didn't move. I didn't blink. My glass stayed perfectly still in my hand, the water inside trembling just slightly from how tightly I was holding it. She always did like to take the scenic route, Rick added, smiling directly at me now. One day I'm sure it'll all click for her. He lifted his glass once more and drank. The crowd clapped, awkward and brief. Some people avoided looking my way altogether. A few smiled apologetically, eyes darting back to their plates. Elise would have said they didn't know better, but that wasn't an excuse anymore. Caleb shifted in his seat but said nothing. Neither did Ava. No one did. My face felt hot. My throat burned, not from anger, not even from humiliation, but from something colder, older. The echo of years where that tone was normal. The casual way he flattened me into a joke for others to swallow. Like I was still a child beneath his thumb. Still the girl too ambitious for her own good. I placed my glass down quietly. Stood, and walked. Not out of the venue. Not in a flurry of rage or tears. Just far enough away to find a sliver of air not touched by his voice. Outside the glass doors, the garden stretched in soft evening gold. String lights blinked above trimmed hedges, and somewhere a string quartet played a cover of something classic and slow. I stood beneath a tree, one hand on the bark, trying to breathe without breaking. The dress clung to my arms, the fabric soft over my healing skin. I hadn't let anyone see the scars, not yet, not here. But in that moment I wished I had. I wished I'd worn them bare. Let the whole room see what it meant to fight and fall and get back up anyway. Because while my father held a champagne glass, I had carried someone through fire. While he laughed, I had risked everything for a stranger. And still, I wasn't enough for him to simply shut his mouth and let me exist in peace. My fingers curled against the tree bark. It wasn't shame I felt anymore. Not really. It was clarity. Clarity wrapped in fury, calm and rising. I wasn't the same girl who'd stood in his kitchen and been told she'd embarrass herself. And whether or not the people inside that hall ever understood, that didn't matter. Someone would. And when they did, when the truth came out, raw and unfiltered, it wouldn't be in my voice. It would be in theirs. I didn't hear the footsteps behind me. Not at first. The night was too quiet out in the garden. still and humming with late summer crickets and the soft clatter of glasses behind the reception hall doors. I had just started to breathe again when I heard her voice. "Jenna," I turned. Ava stood a few feet away, heels in one hand, dress bunched in the other, her hair slightly windblown and eyes glossy with something unreadable. I straightened, instinctively smoothing my sleeves, unsure of what expression to wear. "I'm sorry," she said softly, stepping closer. "For what he said, for what everyone just let happen." "It's fine," I replied, too quickly. "I'm used to it." She shook her head. "You shouldn't have to be." We stood in silence for a moment under the garden lights, two women tied together by marriage and family, but separated by so much unsaid. Then Ava's voice broke, gentle, like something fragile finally finding its way through. "I didn't recognize you at first," she said, her eyes searching mine. "But my sister did. She knew it was you the second she saw your name on the RSVP." My breath caught. "Your sister?" She nodded, smiling through tears now. "Janelle. She was in that apartment fire 2 months ago. Second floor, smoke inhalation collapsed in the back bedroom. They told us someone pulled her out just before it fell in." I froze. "She told me about you," Ava whispered, stepping closer. "She said she didn't know if it was real or a dream, but that this woman, this angel in the smoke, dragged her out. Said your arms were shaking, but you didn't let go. Said she kept thinking you were going to collapse, but you just kept going." My mouth was dry. I didn't know her name, she was unconscious. "I know," Ava said, her voice cracking. "But she told me to find you, to thank you, she made me promise. And then she did something I didn't expect. She reached out and pulled me into a hug, not a polite one. Not one of those gentle thank you hugs reserved for relatives and guests. It was tight, fierce, full of everything I hadn't let myself feel since the fire. "Thank you," she said into my shoulder. "For saving her, for not giving up." I stood frozen for a beat, then let myself lean into it just slightly. "I didn't even know who she was," I whispered. "I just couldn't leave her there." "You didn't," Ava said, pulling back. "And because of you she'll get to finish school, she'll get to come to my baby shower, she'll get to live." I swallowed hard. The garden lights above us flickered gently, reflecting in the tears on Ava's cheeks. Her mascara had smudged, but her smile never wavered. Inside, laughter bubbled back to life as the next round of toasts began. I heard my mother's voice this time, light, practiced, saying something about how proud she was of both her children. I didn't move. Ava looked toward the hall, then back at me. "There's something you need to see, and I think everyone else needs to see it too." Before I could ask what she meant, she squeezed my hand. "Stay here, I'll be right back." Then she slipped back through the glass doors, barefoot, dress brushing the grass, determination glowing like firelight in her eyes. And I stood under the stars, heart pounding, wondering for the first time in a long time if the tide was about to turn. I heard the shift in the room before I saw it. The chatter dropped to a hush, like a wave pulling back before it breaks. A microphone gave a soft whine of feedback, and I turned toward the open glass doors, heart still thrumming from my moment with Ava. Inside, she stood at the front of the room, barefoot and radiant, holding the mic with both hands like it weighed more than it looked. "Sorry to interrupt," she began, voice clear but trembling. "I know the night's been full of beautiful memories and even better champagne. But before we go further, there's something you all need to see." She nodded toward the DJ booth. The lights dimmed. A screen lowered slowly behind her, one of those white pull-down ones used for slideshows and sappy videos of childhood photos. I took one step inside, then stopped near the doorway, half hidden by a potted tree. My hands gripped the back of an empty chair. "This isn't about me," Ava continued, glancing toward the guests. "It's not even really about Caleb, it's about someone else in this room. Someone whose story deserves to be seen in full, not buried under old narratives or careless jokes." The screen flickered to life. No music, no titles, just raw footage. Grainy, shaky, clearly from a local news broadcast. A smoky apartment complex lit with emergency floodlights. Flames clawed out of a second-floor window, black smoke pouring through the siding. Sirens wailing, shouts in the background. And then me, dragging a limp figure across the threshold, my turnout gear scorched, my helmet slipping back as I leaned forward with everything I had. My face was streaked with soot and blood. My right arm hung strangely, burned raw from shoulder to wrist. I collapsed just as medics reached us, right there on the pavement, still half shielding the woman I'd carried. I heard someone gasp. Another person murmured, "Oh my God." The video cut to a shot of Claire giving a statement to the camera, her voice firm. If she'd waited another 10 seconds, they both would have been gone. What Jenna Callahan did tonight, that was pure instinct, pure heart. That was a firefighter doing her job with everything she had. The screen went black. Silence. You could hear the hum of the lights overhead. A fork dropped somewhere near the back, and then the sound of glass shattering. I turned. Rick stood frozen beside the head table, his champagne flute shattered at his feet. His hand trembled at his side. His mouth opened like he might say something, but nothing came. Ava stepped away from the mic. Every pair of eyes shifted, to her, to me, then back to him. I could feel it, the thick, stunned realization settling into the crowd like a dropped curtain. The woman Rick had just publicly mocked. The one still figuring things out. She'd carried someone through fire. Literally, I didn't move. Didn't speak, I didn't need to. The room spoke for me in the stillness that followed. And for once, my silence was louder than anything he could have said. No one spoke. The shattered glass glinted on the floor like some kind of offering, sharp, broken, undeniable. Rick stood motionless beside it, one hand still slightly raised as if frozen mid-toast, the other curling into a fist at his side. His face, usually so composed in its superiority, was blank now. He blinked once, then again. His voice cracked. It wasn't loud, just enough to be heard in the stillness. I had no idea. The silence held. No one moved. Even the DJ had stopped the soft playlist. Rick took a step forward. "That was you?" He asked, quieter this time, like he couldn't quite reconcile what he'd seen with what he'd always chosen to believe. I didn't flinch. I stood straighter. My arms at my sides, chin level. The dress sleeves brushing my still-healing skin like a reminder you carried fire. You lived through it, don't shrink now. I met his eyes fully, finally. My voice didn't waver. It always was. I let the words breathe. I just stopped waiting for you to notice. A few chairs creaked as people shifted, unsure whether to exhale or stay caught in the tension. Rick's face crumpled just slightly around the eyes. He stepped toward me, not fast, not grand, but each movement felt like a lifetime of weight sloughing off. He stopped right in front of me, barely an arm's length away. He looked down, voice gravel-thick. I was wrong, about so much. His eyes lifted again. You did something I never had the courage to even imagine. You saved a life. With your own on the line. And he placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Jenna, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't before. I didn't say anything right away. The apology hung in the air like smoke after a storm, unexpected, overdue, and still somehow too tender to touch. 1,000 versions of this moment had played in my head over the years. Most of them angry, most of them full of shouting and slammed doors and words I'd never be able to take back. But this quiet collapse of a man who had spent decades building walls out of judgment and pride, it wasn't the apology I had imagined. It was the one that mattered. I nodded, that was all. And that small movement, my own kind of forgiveness, seemed to land harder than any speech I could have given. From somewhere near the back, someone clapped once, then again, and slowly others joined in. Not loud, not forced. Just an honest murmur of acknowledgement spreading through the room like warm light touching dark corners. Rick stepped back, wiped his face once, quick like he was embarrassed, and returned to his seat, quieter than he'd ever been. Ava caught my eye from the head table, smiling through tears. Caleb stood beside her now, his hand resting over his chest, like even he didn't know how to put this moment into words. And me, I breathed, really breathed. The ache I'd carried for years, the one shaped like his approval, his words, his silence, began to loosen its grip. I wasn't here to shame him. I was here to stop letting his voice be louder than mine. The reception hummed back to life slowly, like a house waking after a power outage. Guests drifted back to their conversations with a new kind of softness in their eyes. The music started up again, something slower now, gentler. The tension that had once filled the room like fog had cleared, and the air felt different, lighter. I stood near the patio doors, hands wrapped around a glass of ice water, watching the guests sway beneath the canopy of lights. Caleb had pulled Ava into a slow dance, his forehead resting against hers like they were the only two people left in the world. My mother was chatting quietly with someone from our church back home, her voice steady, as if the past hour hadn't rearranged our entire family's orbit. And then, through the soft light and motion, I saw him, my father. He stood near the edge of the garden, one hand in his pocket, the other loosely holding a paper napkin folded into a square. He wasn't looking at anyone, just watching the trees sway above the hedges, the same way he used to stand by the barn after a storm. I stepped outside, my shoes crunching softly over gravel until I was standing a few feet away. He looked over, almost surprised. "Hey, hey," I said. There was a wooden bench beneath a tree draped in fairy lights. Without a word, we both walked toward it and sat down, shoulders just far enough apart to feel safe but not cold. For a few seconds we just listened to the music drifting out from the reception hall. It was the kind of song that didn't ask for attention, just let you feel what you needed to. "I don't know how to make this right," he said quietly, eyes on his hands. "But I know I want to." I didn't speak. I waited. "I spent so long trying to make you into something I understood," he continued, voice thick. "And when you chose a path I didn't expect, it scared me, so I mocked you. That was easier than facing my own fear that maybe you were stronger than I ever was." He looked over then, not defensive, not pleading, just open. "You did what I never could, Jenna. You stood for something without needing approval, you became someone on your own terms." I swallowed. "I didn't need you to agree with me. I just needed you to see me." "I see you now," he said. I nodded, blinking back the heat rising behind my eyes. "I want to do better," he added. "I want to be the kind of father who shows up now, not in some performative way, just in the way that counts, the quiet kind." A breeze moved through the leaves above us. I glanced down at my hands, the edge of my sleeve pulled slightly up, revealing a sliver of the scar beneath. I didn't pull it down. "I don't need perfection," I said softly. "Just honesty." "You have it," he said, "from now on." We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't haunted by everything he hadn't said before. It was just two people trying, two people finally meeting where pain could no longer speak louder than truth. "I've been so angry for so long," I admitted. "Even before the fire, even before I left, I thought proving myself would fix everything. But it doesn't undo what was missing." "No," he said. "But it gives us a place to start." I looked over at him, at the lines in his face I hadn't noticed before, the way his shoulders didn't seem so rigid anymore. "Then let's start here," I said. He nodded once. "Here's good." Above us, the garden lights glowed against the night sky like tiny constellations. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like I had to fight for my place under them. The recruits were already sweating before the sun cleared the tree line. Their gear was newer than mine ever was, shinier, better fitted, but the fear in their eyes was something I recognized deeply. That quiet dread that maybe they weren't cut out for this. That someone would find out they didn't belong. I let them sweat. 15 more flights," I called out as they dragged weighted hoses up the training tower. "And if your legs aren't burning, you're doing it wrong." Groans echoed down the stairwell, but no one quit. That's what mattered. I stood at the base of the tower, arms crossed, sunlight warming the old scars that webbed across my right arm. I didn't wear long sleeves anymore. Not on shift. Not when I trained. Not even when I visited home. They weren't something I hid, they were something I earned. After drills, one of the rookies, kid named Hannah with fire in her gut and zero upper body strength, limped over, panting. "Do you ever get used to the pain?" she asked. I thought for a second, then grinned. "You don't. But you learn to respect it." She blinked at that, then nodded, as if storing it somewhere for later. On the second Saturday of each month, I drove back to my hometown. It was always a strange feeling, passing the old diner, the worn billboard near the silo, the road that curled past the farmhouse where I'd once shouted at a man who didn't believe in me. I didn't stay overnight, but I always stopped by. Dad kept a thermos of coffee ready, the kind he used to brew only for himself. We'd sit on the porch, talking about nothing and everything. He asked about the station, about the rookies, about whether I'd eaten enough that week. Sometimes we watched the wind blow through the wheat fields. Sometimes we didn't speak at all, but he was there, present. And every time someone dropped by, an old neighbor, a friend from his hunting circle, he'd wave them over, puffing with quiet pride. "This is my daughter," he'd say, nodding toward me with a look I used to dream about. The one they showed on the news. The one who ran through fire. They always looked at me a little differently then. I never craved recognition. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. Not to be seen as a rebel or a disappointment. Just as me. One afternoon I was cleaning out a box in the locker room, old paperwork, academy manuals, a few crumpled photos when I came across the watch. The one I gave Caleb. "Time reminds us who we are." I hadn't thought about that phrase in months. But as I held it in my hands again, I smiled, because time had reminded me. Through every failure, every rejection, every flame and scar and laugh and ache, it had shaped me, not into someone my father finally approved of, but into someone I could live with, someone I could be proud of. That was the real victory. Not the applause, not the footage, not even the apology. But this, standing on my own 2 feet, fully myself, with no one left to convince but me. So, if you're still watching, tell me this: who made you doubt your worth? And more importantly, how are you going to prove them wrong? Write it in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Because sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that carry us through the fire.